Welcome to this sample audio clip, which comes from the Conversation series featuring Multihull pioneer Jim Brown. This segment comes from an interview that Jim conducted with sailor and designer John Marples. To find out more about this historic, multi-hull-oriented audio series, please visit us at www.outrigmedia.com.
Hello, everyone. This is a talk between two old friends, myself and my longtime business partner and cruising buddy, sailing buddy, designing buddy, John Marples. We'd like to approach the subject of cruising when we did most of our cruising back in the 1970s. Wasn't it the 1970s, John?
Yeah, I went cruising later in the 70s, and you were earlier in the 70s.
And what we'd like to do is try to draw some kind of a comparison for our listeners between the attitude, the very motivation between cruising back then and how it's going now. There seems to be a whole lot to it nowadays that avoids the essence that we experienced back in the early days before GPS and before all the other technical innovations and what Dick Newitt calls the modern inconveniences of today's so-called cruising. And I think it would be well for us to try to draw some comparisons here so that the listener can decide for himself whether or not all of the expensive and rather cumbersome, prone to failure contraptions of today's cruising really adds to the cruising experience. That's the way I see it, John?
Well, yeah. Let me start off with the preface, the first paragraph of the preface of Quen Cultra's book called Queequeg's Odyssey. It was written back in the early 70s after he did a circumnavigation. And he says, with little money and no previous experience in boat construction, sailing, or navigation, I built a trimaran in a Midwestern barnyard, launched it in the Illinois River, and sailed around the world. I'm an ordinary young man, no genius or physical strongman, raised on an Illinois farm in the heartland of America. But with a lot of hard work and study, I fulfilled my dream. And I think that kind of says it in a nutshell. You know, it's people with a yearning to go see some foreign ports and have some adventure, and who want to become more self-sufficient and reliant on their own wits, you know, to get where they want to go, and therein lies the real, you know, crux, the real encouragement to go. It's the adventure.
I see it that way, John. It seems to me like if it really is the adventure that people are going for, that a lot of the stuff they're taking along with them is to deprive them of that adventure, and I don't think a lot of it adds to the cruising experience. I'm not saying that we should get rid of GPS because it's wonderful to know that you're not going to get lost, but I must say it's also quite wonderful sometimes to be lost. I mean, that's adventure when you don't know where you are.
Well, and the other part of that is even with GPS, you might find yourself lost because some of the islands are still not correctly placed on the Earth's surface in the charts that you will be using for navigation. They might be several miles off or more still, because they haven't been updated to this new GPS standard that we use. And
you found
therein
that
lies
in the South Pacific, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a significant danger there. We actually heard of boats getting shipwrecked, a couple of them, in fact, because they were sailing by an island at night and not giving it a very wide berth, feeling this was going to put them in the right, position with respect to the island, when in fact the island was dead ahead because it was misplaced on the chart. And I know of two boats that were lost that way. And that was in the very early years. And I doubt whether a lot of those charts, because these if we're talking about remote islands, the necessity for updating the charts may not have even today become strong enough for the charting agencies to make the changes. And if you're using old charts, it'll definitely be true. And charts are one of the things that are difficult to come by and are very expensive. And so just being aware that could be a difficulty gives you that much more safety.
Well, I wonder, John, about the cost. Do you want to address the issues of cost first?
Well, right. Anybody considering going cruising is doing so because they probably have a boat and they've done enough sailing to realize that, that boat for the cost of groceries could take them to far off ports. And so there's always that punch list of things that people will come up with that says, gee, what do I need to go cruising? And depending on who you talk to, there will be different priorities in that list, and some of the stuff on the list can just be flat out omitted because it's just going to add a lot of complexity and cost to the boat, but it really doesn't add significantly to the experience.
Well, that's one thing you and I have seen in so many of our clients, is that they spend everything they've got getting the boat built and outfitted to their imagined desires, and then end up without enough money to really go anywhere.
Yeah, and if they do, they're going to spend a significant amount of time sitting in various ports and so forth, waiting for parts for some of that gear when it breaks down. We saw that as being quite prevalent in our travels, and the only time that we had a piece of gear break down was the depth sounder packed up. We left it with the electronics guy in Suva, Fiji, and went cruising for a month out into the outer islands. And never missed it. We got used to throwing the lead on a line and then judging the depth of the water by its color. You didn't really need a depth sounder, so there's a lot of stuff you can really do without.
Well, people are shocked these days that I tell them that we made our original 3-year cruise as a family without even a VHF radio on board. We thought that it would crash the scene, but nowadays a great many cruisers really live by their radios.
Yeah, we had a VHF and we used it very, very little. Every freighter that I ever tried to call that we passed, mid-ocean never responded. And I know that some of the cruisers, have these handheld VHFs that they carry around in their back pocket, so they can talk to all their friends while they're ashore on the boat or anything. They use it like a telephone. But gee, when it comes down to it, that just further insulates you from the culture that you're visiting, and gives, makes the desire, to reach out to the local people even less. It's a diversion. You could do without.
Boy, we've talked about that, John. I see a tremendous difference between today and yesteryear willingness of sailors to really immerse themselves in foreign cultures, languages, ports, and to travel over land. What was it you were saying about the rallies?
Oh, right. There's an increasing number of these cruising rallies where you join a group and you just go en masse, and they go into the Caribbean, they go into Europe, they go into the South Pacific, and sure, it's a great safety net for people to travel in a group. But when you get to where you're going, the group tends to stay together as sort of a big clique, and it just stays such that the people don't reach out. They don't learn anything about the culture. They see the sights and so forth, but they stick around by themselves as tourists and never talk to any of the locals. And that's sort of a sad commentary. I can understand that some people, might go cruising in a rally who would never venture off by themselves, and maybe it increases the possibilities for those people. But as a method to go see foreign lands, I think it falls far short of what they really want to get out of it, and that's contact with the culture itself.
Well, maybe they would like to have that contact, particularly before leaving. But I understand the fear that is involved with trying to immerse yourself in and experience culture shock. I really don't think that in our cruise with our family, I really don't think that we would have stopped, at least not as for long as we did, and actually move ashore and live and work in a foreign country. I don't think we would have done that unless we had been forced to. As you remember, I got sick down there in southern Mexico, and by the time we got to Guatemala, I had to get ashore. I came down with hepatitis, and we didn't know what it was at the time, and all of that. But the fact that our cruising schedule had been interrupted forcefully, that is, we had to stop long enough so that it was then important to stick around until the next sailing season in order to avoid those terrible cyclones that they have on the western seaboard of Central America, the so-called chubascos. We had to stop for about 8 months in Guatemala, and it turned out to be the best thing that happened to us on the whole trip, without being forced to enter the local culture, move ashore, rent a house, go to school to study the language. We all went to school to study Spanish. Without all that, our trip wouldn't have been anything like it was the way it turned out. I'm so glad I got sick.
Yeah, right. Well, that comes down to one of the primary things that really is part of a personal preparation before you go cruising, and that is research.
Thanks for listening. For more like this, or to obtain the complete audio conversation, come visit us on the web at www.outrigmedia.com.